everybody, check these out. Do you want to know all about peanuts? What about peaches? What about other famous Southern things like collard greens, okra, grits, cornmeal, tamales? Wait, what? Tamales? Yes. Okay, so this is the deal, right? Southern food. Southern food is this huge, massive, organic living thing. And I've got some experts that are going to tell you all about the food of South Carolina today. So thank you so much for joining me. My name is Virginia Willis. I'm a chef and cookbook author out of Atlanta, Georgia, and welcome to Cookbooks with Virginia. So every Friday, or near about every Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube, it's Cookbooks with Virginia, and I celebrate cookbook authors, and it's really and truly like the favorite part of my week because I get to talk to people that I admire, that I read, that I learn from, new people, new friends, old friends, you name it. And it's all about the cookbook. So this week we have got Taste the State, South Carolina's signature food recipe and their stories. And y'all, this is so right up my alley. I'm not from South Carolina. My grandmother was, but I love this sort of deep dive on Southern food. And so let's bring in Chef Kevin Mitchell and Dr. David Shields, the authors of this book. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Virginia, thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. So I've been so excited about it. So y'all, let me just tell you the beginning. To win a copy, you're going to go to my Instagram feed. And David's old school. He's on Facebook, so you can find him over there. But if you want to win a copy of the book, you're going to like Kevin. He's under Chef Scholar, and then like me, and you'll follow the instructions and get to win a copy. So let's just kick it off. Let's just tell us a little bit about, Kevin, I'm going to ask you to go first. If you'll tell us a little bit about yourself, and then David, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing.
Oh, well, I am a chef instructor at the Culinary Institute of Charleston here in Charleston, South Carolina. I've been here actually in December. It'll be 13 years moving to South Carolina. I'm also, of course, an author. I am deemed one of the South Carolina chef ambassadors. And also, just following in David's footsteps, becoming this great culinary historian.
Thank you for that. Thank you that for sure. And what footsteps to follow. So, all right, David, you're teed up. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Oh, I'm a professor at the University of South Carolina, but I'm also chair of the Carolina Gold Rice Foundation, which is this nonprofit that for the last 15 years has been researching and bringing back the classic ingredients of Southern cooking, beginning with Carolina gold rice, but 40 some other ingredients as well that were functionally extinct at the beginning of this century. But now, having tracked them down in the field, we have got farmers growing them, chefs using them, and some of them you can buy in your local grocery store.
I know. I think it is so cool. I just remembered. I think I referred to you as like the Indiana Jones of heirloom Southern foods in my last book.
I haven't been chased by mountain lions or anything like that.
In a complete fangirl moment, I think I referred to you as that. But it's true. You find these like lost ingredients, right? Because the Southern food, much like so much industrial food, Southern food has sort of been, I don't know, lack of a better way of putting it, sort of dumbed down, right? It's like in terms of like what we grow is not what was grown 100 years ago. And so these ingredients.
Something that sort of odd happened in the middle of the 20th century when plant breeders began to be preoccupied with productivity,
right,
disease resistance, processability, and things like that. They forgot about flavor.
Yes.
So yes. All of the classic plants upon which Southern cooking, and it isn't just South Carolina, this goes across the board, got supplanted by these agronomic plants that didn't taste as good. So the question is, where did the old plants go? And one of the things which is, here's a truism. If something authentically was the best tasting thing in its category, whether it's a sweet potato or a sugar cane variety or even a wheat, some old believer somewhere has got it in their back patch because it was the thing, and nothing else that came since has been better. And one of the things which distinguishes Southern food from other regions is we actually saved most of our heirlooms.
Yes.
And it was a matter of just finding who that person was that had it. Just a few days ago, at 99 years of age, a man named Manning Farmer died. And he was the man who single-handedly preserved from the 1940s to 2021 Cox prolific corn, which was Virginia's great meal white dent corn. And no one else was growing it since the 1980s, he alone. And in 2017, we found him. Now that corn is being grown from Maine to Texas. Marsh Hen Mill, Colonial Milling Company have it as part of their product
Oh
line.
my gosh, how
So
fantastic.
the flavor is back. One man kept that going.
No, man, that is so cool. All right, so Kevin, let me ask you this. So how are you drawn to this? I mean, I know that I came to food writing through the kitchen too, right? You know what I mean? Like I was a cook first and worked in restaurants and a cook first, and then now do different things. But what was your journey with this, and how did y'all come about with Taste of the State?
Well, just like you, my journey started in the kitchen as a chef, working in different parts of the industry, and like I said, 13 years ago, that trajectory brought me here to South Carolina, and just being kind of engulfed in like the history of the food that comes from this region, specifically South Carolina, and of course more broader the South. This thing just really happened, I would say, when David and I first met. We first met through his work with the Carolina Gold Rice Foundation. We hosted a rice symposium here in Charleston, and I was at our school. We hosted it, and I was asked to do a demo featuring Carolina Gold Rice. And this dish that I had to do was chicken bog. And everyone knows that, of course, I am not from the South. I grew up in New Jersey and I've worked throughout. But in my mind, I'm like, what is chicken bog? And
someone's overcooked this rice, y'all.
Yeah. And so David sends me the recipe from Anson Mills. And so I'm like, okay, if anyone knows, it's like a 2 to 3 day process to make this dish. And I'm going through making it and really learning about it, talking to David about it. And then I kind of realized that this was something similar that my grandmother would make at home. Like, so,
Right.
and I really got into cooking at 6 years old, learning from her, she's from North Carolina.
I was going to say, first thing I want to ask you is, where are your people from? You may be from New Jersey, but where are your people from?
She's definitely from North Carolina. Yeah. I do have some research that says that some of my further ancestors may have settled in the PD region of South Carolina. So I'm still trying to figure out those things. So through this meeting, I do this demo, I meet David, and then our paths crossed again, maybe about a year or so later, at an ACF, or American Culinary Federation conference hosted here in Charleston. And David brings me this story about Nat Fuller. Nat Fuller was one of the greatest Black caterers here in Charleston in the late 1800s. And he comes with me with this idea of this reenacting a dinner that he held in Charleston at the end of the Civil War. And I tell people all the time, and David knows this, initially I didn't think it was going to happen. You have conversations with people, you meet people, life happens, you move on, right? But little did I know, David was very serious, because about 2 weeks later, he inundated my email with any and everything I could ever possibly want to learn about Nat Fuller.
That's
So
awesome.
at that point, I was like, oh, well, this guy's pretty serious. I think we're going to do this. So we set on this path. We formed this committee, and people like Sean Brock were on there, and Natalie Dupree was a part of the committee, and some other luminaries here in the city. And we set on recreating his dinner, and that finally happened in 2015. And learning about his story really was the catalyst for me to really try to understand who these other enslaved cooks were,
Right.
who I definitely believe kind of lay the foundation for what we know today as Southern food. And so a chance meeting after that with John T. Edge from Southern Foodways Alliance, where he calls me and says, hey, do you know Frank Stitt? I'm like, yeah, everyone knows Frank Stitt. I didn't know him personally, but I knew of Frank Stitt. Yeah. And I think he was saying that Frank was interested in maybe hosting a dinner similar to the Nat Fuller dinner in Alabama. And unfortunately, of course, it didn't come to fruition. But John T. and I got into a conversation about my future, and I was wanting to go back to school and get a master's degree. I had a bachelor's degree in management, and then and people think I'm crazy, but I was already in a master's program for education, but I really wasn't enjoying it. And people are like, well, chef, you're an educator. How can you not like to be in a program about education? It just didn't appeal to who I thought I really was. And so having this conversation, John T's like, well, hello, how about the University of Mississippi in Southern Studies? And do you also know that SFA is housed in the very building?
Right. No,
and I did not know that. So fast forward, I apply, I get accepted. So now I'm in school, not as a chef, did no cooking except for at home, and for my classmates who I would barter with them for them to edit some of my papers, and say, hey, I made some jambalaya. But if you want it, I got this paper that may need a little bit of some perusal with your eye. So being in that program really pushed me into the writing part of it. And of course, I always stayed in contact with David during that 2 years of me being in Mississippi, and would, run things by him. I'd send him some of my writings for some of the papers that I had to turn in, and just really started getting into it. And when I graduated in 2018, I moved back to Charleston. I went back to the Culinary Institute of Charleston as a faculty member. And about, I would say, 2019, David sends me an email and says, hey, how about writing a book together? And this book originally came about as a project for David through the press, who wanted him to say, what do you say, David, write like the top 10 hits of the greatest hits of Southern food. And of course, David, in his mind, wanted to write something a little bit more comprehensive, something that was not just about the top 10 hits of Southern food. So, and then he proposes, well, I want to write this, but I want to write this with a chef, and I want to write this with Kevin. And that's how it all came about. We turned in some sample writings, and then next thing you know, we were contracted to write this book.
Let me ask you, so David, how did y'all choose? Asparagus, barbecue, Benny, biscuits, blackberry. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but there's so many different ingredients. Red horse bread, like some of the stuff. I mean, I grew up in Georgia, lived in Louisiana, but I don't think I'd ever heard of red horse bread before.
It's the South Carolina name for hush puppies.
There you go.
Red horse was a type of, it's a relative of the catfish family. And when they had fries and stews using red horse, this was the bread that was cooked alongside at outdoor events.
Right.
And the word hush puppy doesn't really get used for, cornmeal fritters until about the 1940s,
Uh-huh.
universally in the South. It gets, there was one of those Works Project Administration guides to Florida, which talked about the fish camps of Florida and mentioned, cornmeal fritters were called hush puppies. And newspaper reporters picked that up. And all of a sudden, this, little wad of deep fried cornmeal that was in every southern state suddenly had a new name.
Right.
And ever since the mid 20th century, we've called them hush puppies. But in different places
now, right? It wasn't the truth, and then all of a sudden, yeah,
Indian meal fritters, red horse bread.
Well, I have a comment. This is, I think this speaks a little bit to what you're doing. It's a dear friend of mine, and I know that she means this, and it's a lot to write on here, so I'm going to say it for everybody. So Carol writes, David, that story you talking about your farmer friend gave me chill bumps, brought tears to my eyes. Here's to the traditional small farmers. Thank you for resurrecting them. So I think first of all, thank you, Carol, for watching. Thank you for writing that kind comment. But I think that's what Taste of the State is all about, right? You guys have chosen these ingredients. You're doing this deep dive on like what Southern ingredients are. And, I was kind of joking about the tamales in the beginning. Tamales are, of course, Mississippi, but you think Mississippi tamales, we were talking about before the show started, like the South is huge. If you start, where in Texas? Is Texas the South? Like where in Texas does that start? And then it goes all the way up to Virginia, or is it Maryland, right? And then, so the South is huge. And then what y'all have done is you've identified these key ingredients that are very specific to South Carolina. And are there any ingredients that you have found in South Carolina or in Taste of the State that maybe didn't make it even as far as to Georgia or North Carolina? Or is there anything that's like sort of an anomaly there?
Right. Well, one of the things that was eaten traditionally was Tanya root, which is the corm or root bulb of an elephant ear plant.
What?
And yes, and this is still eaten in the West Indies. It's called provision plant or Tanya, and it was roasted, baked, and boiled, and it was a favorite breakfast. In the 19th century, if you were moved into Charleston, your neighbor would hand you a bag of Tanya root. So a lot of people growing those elephant ears as ornamentals and throughout the South. Time to get your spade out, dig them up, cook them up, and you have something tasty. And
and I have to tell you, I have seen this in some of the Caribbean and Latin and international markets up here in Atlanta, and I never knew that the bottom of this or the top of this was an elephant ear, right?
That's right.
I mean, I knew it was some kind of root or some kind of tuber or some kind of corm, like you said, or something. But I had no idea those two were connected. Wow. So forgive me. So this is, pre-1830, it was called Tanier or Tanier?
Tanier. Yeah, Tanier.
It wasn't called Tanier.
Tanier. That's a Tanier.
I was getting all fancy. That's why ER is not in South Carolina. It's A in France.
That's right. That's right.
That's funny. Okay, so Tanier and Tanya. Of course it's Tanya. That's super Southern.
Right. You asked how did we decide upon, the 82 that we finally did. We actually have a list that was substantially longer. And Kevin can tell you about the sort of conversations we had.
Yeah, Kevin, let's talk about how did y'all choose?
Well, I think it was a little over 100 initially, and this list was compiled. And David sends me this list, and there's a few things on there. First thing I thought was there are a couple things on here that, for me, not knowing that much about the South, just moving here or whatever, like, you mentioned asparagus, the first thing on the list, and was like, David, when I think of asparagus, I think of, I'm a chef instructor, so I'm thinking, blanched asparagus served with hollandaise. And in my mind, I'm thinking it's all about French cuisine, because that's what we do, of course, in culinary school. So just this list, and what we decided to do was to kind of split it. He said, okay, Kevin, what ingredients or dishes are here that you are interested in writing and researching, and then I will take the ones that I'm interested in writing, and then if there's any left over, we'll just kind of tag team on getting those entries done. And the one we tag team on initially was Blackberry. He actually,
Uh-huh.
a lot of people. David's in Columbia. I'm in Charleston, which is about an hour and a half from.
Mhm.
So a lot of people ask, well, how did you guys write this book in two different cities? Well, thank God for the beauty of technology.
Yeah.
Email and Dropbox were the two
Yep.
two things that we use. But David actually drove to Charleston, and we met in my office, and he showed me his research techniques, what he
Uh-huh.
uses,
Uh-huh.
and which was very interesting. Genealogybank.com, which was really interesting for me, because you think genealogy, I'm thinking researching my ancestors, I'm thinking people, not necessarily thinking food. But you can create your own search engine. You put in, for instance, you put in okra, and then you put in um, all South Carolina newspapers. Then you put in a time frame. So you can go 1800 to 1830, and every article from every newspaper from South Carolina that has the word okra, has a recipe about okra, pops up.
Okay.
So
Boom. My mind is like blown. Are you serious? Holy
yes.
moly, David. Holy moly, Kevin. That's
So so what
awesome.
yeah, so what then happens, of course there are some ingredients where thousands and thousands of articles kind of pop up, and
Yeah.
now you're tasked with kind of rifling through them. So what I did was, and what I'm sure David did, we just kind of went through, we picked out ones that we thought were the most interesting, that had the most interesting stories, maybe a really interesting recipe that we may have not seen before, and then we do, we do cut and paste or copy and paste into a file. The file gets labeled okra, and then for me, I would come back to it 2 or 3 days later when I was ready to sit down and write. I sit down and write my entry, include all the reference materials, and then send it via email to David, and then David would read through it, and then he would send it back with his comments, with his suggestions, um, where I need to extend the stories, um, what specific recipes he thought should go in that particular entry, and then I would, based on his comments and his suggestions, I would go back through, rewrite my entry, then okay, as this is done, I'm going to send it back to David. And then we had a conversation via email. Okay, I think this is great. Um, Once we thought an entry was complete, it would get uploaded into a Dropbox, and
Right.
then we would continue writing from there. And then when we were tasked to, of course, turn in the manuscript, we turned in the manuscript via Dropbox, and then, of course, we had the interesting issue of having more than what we were contracted for, specifically
Yeah. Yeah.
word count, which of course the publishing world was somewhat new to me.
Yes.
I mean, I tested recipes for a cookbook before, but not necessarily
Right.
like really was in the whole understanding word count. And I think we were supposed to be at 75,000. The initial manuscript came in at what, like 125,000.
Yeah. Edit,
So,
edit, 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 edit is your friend. Well, David, what was the most surprising? This is what you do, right? This is what you do, and the rice plant, the rice
Carolina
foundation,
Gold Rice
all these
Foundation.
things. So you've been working with these, lost ingredients for a time. Was there anything that was surprising to you? Was there anything that you learned new? Because you said there's 82, so there's ingredients. So y'all, there's information about all the ingredients. There's recipes about the ingredients. We know about like going back to the 1800s to get the information, genealogy.com. So David, was there anything that surprised you with the Taste of the State book?
Yeah, there are things that really surprised me, like iced tea was northern. Uh, didn't come into the South until around the Civil War period. Doesn't really get established in the South until the 1870s, and
That's fascinating.
and it's entirely seasonal until the 1970s, and then all of a sudden, sweet tea becomes a year-round resource in restaurants. And I learned about the introduction of straws, which interested me. Another thing that I found surprising doing the research was that in the early 19th century, people thought that carbonated water made one drunk. And the soda fountains were sort of places that were had a little riskiness to them. But
it kind of makes sense. Those crazy teenagers hanging out drinking carbonated soda.
Yeah, but what it was that when you put carbonated soda into an alcoholic beverage, the gas would push the alcohol into your bloodstream quicker, so you got drunk faster. And that's what they were observing, and they didn't realize it was
right. And a straw too, for that matter. Sucking down those drinks, that'll happen.
We had lots of discussions about what to exclude and what to include, like pimento cheese. We decided to jettison at one point because the pimento pepper that the pimento cheese revolution in the South was based on was actually Georgia. The Griffin experimental station in Georgia created the perfection pimento, which was what every great Southern pimento cheese employed for much of the 20th century. So
and I think that, and they're the and then I don't know. There's a couple ingredients that I find, and Kevin, I would imagine you might agree with this. And I think it's especially interesting that you didn't grow up here, right? Like, you become a Southern food scholar and experience, and the knowledge that you have, having educated yourself, is completely different than someone that grew up in it. You probably know a heck of a lot more than a lot of people that grew up down here. But there's this, like, there are a couple of things that just people think is like automatically Southern. And I think that pimento cheese is one of them. It's like, it doesn't make it more Southern if you put pimento cheese on top of nachos, right? It just makes it, in my mind, it makes it a train wreck. But I'm not usually subtle about my opinion. But you know what I mean? There's certain things, it's like, one of the great things that I think about, and I know that y'all talk about wheat and corn in this, is the biscuit versus cornbread. It's like, well, where were you? What were your people? Where were you? Literally, where were you? Were you low country or up country, or in Georgia, were you more coastal plain or in the mountains? Like, food can be super, super hyper regional. So what are Kevin, did you pull some things? I can't remember. We were kind of talking about some stuff.
I got a bunch of stuff here.
Okay, let's look at it.
Through, right here.
Okay, what's that?
This is bene seed oil.
What?
And then I have some bene seeds here.
Right?
Which honestly, for me, bene seed oil has become a favorite ingredient of mine. My family here at the house, when I decide to cook, they kind of shrug because they think I'm going to do something with bene. And a lot of times when I've done some events for the South Carolina Chef Ambassador Program, somehow I have to interject bene seeds into there. So it's a running joke amongst people that I know. But I'm a huge fan, especially of the bene seed oil, and you'll read that
color.
This is
amazing.
This is directly from Anson Mills, a mill here in South Carolina, who presses the seeds into oil, and we know that. And you'll read that Bene seed oil was probably the most common, popular cooking oil, cooking fat in this area for many years, until of course the onset of lesser produced or less or cheaper produced oils. Thomas
Cottonseed
Jeff,
oil.
yep,
Cottonseed, yeah.
Thomas Jefferson writes about his his enslaved people using bene seeds. It's ground into a flour, and I actually have in here. I have this is some bene seed flour
Uh-huh.
that I got from our friends at Oliver Farm in Georgia.
Yay, Oliver Farm.
He sent me this. And actually, in Virginia, you'll love this. This is okra
Yes.
that I got from Oliver as well,
Yes.
which has been really great. And then I do have some Carolina Gold rice in here.
Yeah.
This is from Marsh Hen Mills here locally in South Carolina. And then a couple of my favorite other ingredients. I have some Sea Island red peas, and these have come from Anson Mills as well. I use these a lot. And then, but my favorite pea, and David will disagree. He doesn't like them, but the black eye pea. These are these are Marsh Hen black eyed peas as well. This is my favorite pea, mainly only because of the fact that, you know, when I was learning how to cook, my grandmother was teaching me at 6 years old. This is one of the first things that she taught me how to cook. So it has that sentimental value to me.
In your head and your heart.
Yes.
That's where that
So
comes from.
that's where I always, you know, even if when I'm making Hoppin' John, I always look more towards the black eyed pea. I do get people who get upset because I'm not using field peas, because they believe that field peas are the only peas to use in Hoppin' John. And, you know, actually in my class one time I was teaching the students about Hoppin' John, and they have to make it. And the recipe I was using has black eyed peas. However, one of my students stood up and flat out refused to cook John in my classroom with black eyed peas, because that's not how her nana told her to make Hoppin' John, and she wanted field peas. And I said, well, I understand that, but you can opt to not make the Hoppin' John. That's going to affect your grade, of course.
I'm going to opt to give you a bad grade. I'm
Exactly.
going to opt to tell you that the words that you need to learn are yes, chef.
Exactly. But what I do now is, actually next week our students are going into starches and grains, and we're going to be doing Hoppin' John. So what I do now is I have both the black eyed peas, and then I also have Sea Island red peas for those students who want to use those peas.
Yeah,
as
because those
opposed
peas
to
disappeared. Those
they
peas
have
disappeared. I didn't know about those peas.
Yeah,
Those peas
so
disappeared for a long time. The Sea Island reds, and it was thanks to work. But like, all right, I have a question for you guys, real quick. So this Bene seed plant. So y'all, okay, viewers, I'm geeking out here looking at this. Okay, so the taste of the state, 82 ingredients, deep dive on it. Thomas Jefferson wrote this, that, and the other. And then there's photographs, there's recipes. It's phenomenal. But this plant, the flower of the Bene seed looks, or the Bene plant looks kind of like a trumpet. But is it hibiscus related at all?
It's a sesame plant. And it's the West African low oil sesame that was brought over in the colonial period. The sesame seeds you buy in the grocery store are modern sesame, which is 60% oil. And they taste more bitter than the earlier ones. The African Bene, when you press the oil out of the seed, the cake that was left over was extraordinarily flavorful. And it was used like the basis for stews and like a roux. It was the secret ingredient in biscuit making for some people. They would add it. You had the Bene flour, you can put that in as well. But what's interesting about the plant is that the bene seeds form in little pods. And if you get those pods green, you can cook them up like okra. And they have this mucilaginous quality, and it was cooked as a vegetable. The leaves, when stuck in cold water, would form a mucilage, which was the Pepto-Bismol of the 19th century. If you had kids with upset tummies, they would drink a tumbler full of cold bene leaf liquid, and it would soothe the interior of their gastric tract.
Okay. I guess I'm so curious now that, especially since you said the mucilage, it makes me, I mean, I understand it's a sesame plant, but botanically speaking, is there any relation to is it in the mallow family?
I'm trying to
for another day.
Where exactly it is. I don't know right off the top of my head. I don't think it's a mallow though.
No, yeah, no, that's interesting. So y'all, oh my gosh, I could keep going on and on and on. We've got some folks saying they're going to buy the book already. I'm a cook, but I was a history major, and I'm very convinced that our beliefs, our education, our religion, our culture, our everything is reflected on what's on the end of our fork, right? I mean, and that is sort of like how I like to look at food. And I think that what y'all have done here in terms of just this deep dive, duck, crackling bread, hoppin' john, stewed macaroni, mac and cheese. How fun is that? Mullet roe, okra, oranges, persimmons. Oh my gosh. So y'all have written an amazing and really important and beautiful book. And I'm so grateful for you for that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So y'all, I tell you what, if I want, like I said, we could just keep talking and we've way gone over, but there's a couple different things. So for more information, you can message Chef Scholar on IG, and this book is available wherever books are sold, and it's doing so well. They're already ordering another reprint. So this is very specifically about South Carolina, but there are a lot of foods that cross the border, so to speak. And really, I think that if you're a person that just likes food and history and cooking, that this is going to be a good book for you. So gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Cookbooks with Virginia today.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Well, best of luck with your book. And thank you so much for joining me. And I hope to see y'all in person again soon.
Yes.
Well, one of these days.
One of these days. Awesome.
Definitely.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, wasn't that fun? So I could talk to those gentlemen for hours. Huge, major scholarly chef crush on both of them. So the book is Taste the State: South Carolina's Signature Foods, Recipes, and Their Stories. It's published by University of South Carolina Press. I cannot speak highly of it enough. I am going to cuddle up with this book all weekend and finish reading it. A couple other things that I wanted to point out. Eating Well magazine, you can look at that cover or you can look at this cover, but I've got a lot of recipes in the Thanksgiving issue. And thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate it. And let's see, next week is Thanksgiving, so there's a lot of great stuff. And I have a super guest. We're going to have cookies the day after Thanksgiving with Jessie Zwicky. And so you'll have to join me then. So thank you so much for watching, and bon appetit, y'all. Bye-bye now.